So like always, appreciate you guys coming out and covering Penn State football. There seems to be, for whatever reason, I think you guys are messing with me, seems to be a lot of red in here today. So, it's a cluster. It's a cluster of red. Yeah, to be honest with you, my wife had a Christmas sweater on in the facility the other day. So, obviously today is about the future of Penn State. There's a lot of excitement, but obviously I want to take a moment to recognize the past. In the loss of Franco Harris, we heard some things this morning, and didn't want to be quick to put something out there. Wanted to be respectful of the family and everybody involved in what's going on. But obviously a huge loss for football in general, college football, NFL, Penn State, and really Pennsylvania. For him to have the type of career that he had at Penn State and then go on and do it at the Steelers. But more importantly than that, just an unbelievable human being. Was really an ambassador for the university and the football program. Was a servant leader. Every time I had a chance to be around him, I was just so impressed with him and his wife. Obviously, very involved with a lot of different causes, throughout the state of Pennsylvania. But just an amazing human being. So a huge loss for us. Obviously we want to send our condolences to the family, and if there's anything that we can do to support, we'd like to do that. So kind of a weird, conversation to have on this day, but obviously that needed to take a priority in terms of just the type of human being that Franco was. So feels strange to kind of move on to this topic right now, but I want to make sure I do that because obviously this is a really important day to a bunch of young men and their families about their futures. But I did want to take a moment and pay respect to our past. Now, when you talk about this class, we're very happy with the class. There's a lot of balance in the class, offense and defense, as well as early enrollees. I think we have 11 guys that are scheduled right now to be early enrollees, which will be, based on what they all told me today, 16 days when they'll be arriving. The class is about split from offense to defense, from little guys to big guys. I think we got a really good mix there. So I think the other thing that we've done a good job of, and we're going to have to continue to do a good job, is kind of branching out and going to more places. I think obviously Dakari and Selma, Alabama, I think are a really good example of that. But at the end of the day, we're still talking about what I would describe as Penn Staters and Penn State kids and Penn State families. You get a chance to spend some time with Dakari and his family. His dad's the principal of the school. Mom is phenomenal. They've done a great job raising Dakari. Obviously doing a great job in the state of Pennsylvania and keeping the best players home is always a priority for us. And I think we've done a good job of that. But then also the region, whether it's New York or whether it's New Jersey or Virginia or Maryland, I think we've done a good job of having a presence in those areas as well. And then probably the other thing that jumps out to me is trying to get really good players from really good high schools so they're academically prepared to come in here and be successful, but also really good high school programs as well. Whenever you can get really good players from great high schools that also know what it takes to win and the sacrifices that need to be made, then you got a chance to be special. So I'm very pleased with the class. As you guys know, this is the first signing day, so there will be another signing day. We also have the possibility of some transfer portal options as well. And then we got one guy that we've been recruiting for a long time that still hasn't signed yet. So we'll see how that all plays out. But again, I appreciate you guys being here, and I'm happy to open up the questions.
Raise your hand, we'll get a mic to you. We'll start with Brendan and then Fred?
James, when it came to meeting needs in this class, how do you think you did? And are there some areas that you think you still have some work to do potentially in that late signing period, or be it through the transfer portal?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. You know, I think if you kind of look at us and, you know, what we've been able to do, I think overall, I think good. You know, if you look on the offensive side of the ball, we'd like to get another offensive lineman if we could, specifically an offensive tackle or a guy that's, you know, like you know, the guys that we signed in this class that have position flexibility. I think you look at Birchmeyer and you look at Javen and maybe Donka. I think, you know, I think they can play all 5 positions in terms of the length to play tackle, the girth to play guard, and the intelligence to play center. You know, so we'll see how that plays out. But I'd like to see us get another offensive lineman and then wide receiver. You know, that's a position where, you know, I could see us sign a couple more guys at that position just to make sure that we have the competition at that position on a similar scale that we do at tight end and running back. I think that's going to be important for us moving forward. So offensive tackles that are still out there, wide receivers that are still out there, you know, we'll be in pursuit. On the defensive side of the ball, we'd like to get a defensive tackle, possibly another defensive end, just from a numbers perspective. And then again, depending on how this thing plays out in the back end of defensive back, we could be in the need for 1 or 2 more defensive backs. So, you know, we'll see how this whole thing plays out, but those would be probably, you know, needs that I would say that are still out there that we'd like to try to address either through the second signing day with high school prospects or some transfer portal prospects.
Greg?
Coach, you had an interesting signee who had an interesting recruitment in Mega Barnwell, and he's obviously a guy who, just based on his frame, signed as a tight end is what you guys announced, but certainly seems like he could grow into any number of positions. So what is your plan for him short-term and long-term as he gets set to enroll in 16 days?
Yeah, so good question. You know, as you guys know, Mega committed to us in like 4th grade. We tried to convince him not to commit. When he committed, felt like I wanted to make sure that, you know, they were comfortable and truly knew what that was. I think it was actually 9th grade. Then his eyes started to wander a little bit in 10th grade, and then ended up committing back to us. Which doesn't always happen. So I think, you know, obviously we've been able to get to know him and the family really well. We have recruited him to play tight end. We did recruit a number of tight ends in this class. But to your point, he does have position flexibility. You know, he's the tallest guy in this class. We do think he could play defensive end. We do think he could play defensive tackle. You know, we think he can play tight end for sure. And then I think there's also a chance that he could play on the offensive line. Now, most high school kids don't want to hear that they're, you know, being projected to move to offensive line until you show them how many first-round draft choices on the offensive line started at tight end. That's usually a pretty good, you know, pretty good story to tell. But at the end of the day, we want guys to play the position they want to play. A lot of times, guys will kind of see that on their own that they need to move. But you know, to be honest with you, we just wanted him in our program. He's a really good athlete, great family, really good student. With position flexibility, and he may be at tight end here for 4 to 5 years, or a number of other positions, and we'll just see how, you know, the genetics play out. But we've been very honest and open with the kid and the family that some of these things are possibilities. But again, you know, we wouldn't move him unless him and the family were on board with the decision.
Tyler?
Hey, James. Happy
Hey,
signing day.
You as well.
A couple players that I heard you refer to as steals during the broadcast. I may have missed that reference to another player, but Jackson Smolik and London Montgomery. Can you kind of expand on why you feel that way and what you think maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, why that may be shown through?
Well, I think Smolik, again, if you just kind of look at his story, you know, gets invited to the Elite 11 at the last minute. There's no hesitation. There's no hurt feelings that he's getting called at the last minute. jumps on a plane at the last minute, gets out there, competes, and does really well. Is hurt his junior year, so there's not a lot of evidence and film out there on him. And then he comes to our camp and earns a scholarship, and like, God forbid that's how, you know, this happens anymore. Most guys don't go through the process that way, but came to camp, earned a scholarship, did a lot of things really well, great family, and we're excited about it. You know, we're really excited about him. I thought he had a really good senior year. Got a lot of the traits and intangibles that we look for. We'll be here during the spring, so we'll have a chance to evaluate. Plus, I went and watched him play. It was a bitter cold day in Iowa. It was raining, you know, and watching him throw the ball at warm-ups on the sideline, it didn't even faze him. He's got massive hands. He's just got a lot of traits, you know, that you look for at that position. So we're looking forward to working with him and helping him develop. And then London, you know, didn't get hurt junior year like Jackson did, but London, I think rushed for over 2,300 yards as a junior. I think he would have a chance to rush for over 3,000 yards as a senior. Gets hurt before the year starts, commits to us. There's just not a whole lot. When you get hurt, you know, don't play your senior year, there's obviously not a whole lot of people talking about you. And you go back and watch his junior year tape, it's really good. I've really enjoyed getting to know him and the family, just great people. The more people you talk to about his personality, the more you get to know him, and the type of impact he has on others is really strong. So, you know, we're excited about him, but I think, you know, the reason I probably say it is because of the injury, and people haven't had a chance to watch him, you know, in a long time and get live evaluations. And as you guys know, a lot of the rankings are not just based off of film, it's based off of live evaluations, whether game evaluations or camp. And he just didn't get many opportunities to do that.
Snyder?
Afternoon, James.
How you doing?
Good. Your linebacker class, I think, is going to stack up one of the best in the country when you look across different sites. Can you just go through where they fit positionally, their recruitments, just kind of what they bring to the table?
Yeah, for us, I think you guys have heard me say this before, we'd really like to recruit kind of 3 outside backers. And then, you know, whoever makes sense at the end to move to Mike, do that. You really don't want to play with an old school true Mike on the field. You'd rather have 3 outside linebackers that create position flexibility. All these guys have length. All these guys have athleticism and run. You can kind of make a similar argument about Tamir. Tamir was one of the most highly recruited guys in the country, and then he gets hurt. You guys maybe heard me say this, you know, on the broadcast. I'm not sure what got on the broadcast and what didn't, but I remember being at a game with Terry Smith on the sideline, one of Brashear's games, and Ohio State was there, Michigan was there, Clemson was there, Notre Dame was there. It was like who's who of college football on the sideline. Like, we're going to be in for a fight with this one. And fortunately, we were able to convince him to stay home and play at LBU. He's another guy that I think if would have played his senior year would have had a dominant year. So we got 3 guys that we think could really play all 3 positions. You know, if I had to kind of put it on the board right now, you know, Tamir probably at Mike with his size. He's a big young man, but has the athleticism and movement and leadership qualities. And then obviously you got 2 guys that could play, you know, on the outside to start, but I think could grow into Mike linebackers as well. Rojas is exactly how we would, you know, like them built in terms of his length and athleticism. He's a guy that you watch his tape, you could make the argument he could play running back here. That's the type of athleticism that he has. I could see him starting out to the field based on being a space player. And then Kavion Keys is a guy that we were able to kind of flip late, and I could see him playing in the boundary, but you can make the argument with him playing in the field too. So the good thing is we got flexibility with all 3 of those guys. All 3 have really good tape. All 3 of them are really good students. And I know they're excited about the opportunity of coming here and coming in and competing in what's going to be one of the better linebacker rooms in the country, especially, you know, the way we've been able to get Abdul to develop in his first year on campus. So it's going to be a really fun position to watch, you know, over the next year.
Hey James, how you doing?
Good, Bob. How are you?
I'm good. With the way that you guys play defense since you've been here, that star position, whether it's the body type, it's kind of a tweener at the start, safety, outside linebacker. How do you identify them as recruits to start? And then how many of them in this class maybe do you think you might have, depending on how they fill out and maybe their athleticism?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we necessarily at this stage recruit a guy to be a star. We try to recruit enough safeties and corners, knowing that in a lot of situations we're gonna have the opportunity to play to our strengths and match up with the people that we're playing, you know, from an offense perspective, match up with them. So you're really talking about the possibility of, you know, 5 DBs on the field. Sometimes that may come from your third best safety. Sometimes that may come from your third best corner, or maybe it's just an argument who's your 5th best DB to get on the field. You know, one of the things you have to watch is when you have an undersized star or nickel or however you want to characterize it. That's where people can get into some situations where they're throwing perimeter screens to the running back, and they got a matchup advantage with maybe you have an advantage from a coverage standpoint, but now they have an advantage from a blocking perspective based on size. So at every position you'd like to be as big and as long as you possibly can be, but ultimately that guy better be a really good football player. Obviously, you know, Daquan Hardy has done a really good job for us in that role, and I think will continue to do it. But we need to kind of develop, you know, the next guy and find out who that's going to be. And again, whether it's one of these incoming guys or whether it is a corner or a safety, is really to be determined. And it's really about how do we get the next best guy on the field. You know, you look at some of the safeties in this class that we recruited. I think some of them could actually play corner, which would make you feel like some of those guys could play the nickel corner. And I think we got some corners with some length and some, you know, football intelligence that they could play that position. The other thing that you don't talk about a whole lot, but as blitzers, you know, how those guys handle, you know, that position as blitzers for you as well. So we got some pretty good options, but we'll see how that plays out this spring, and also see how that plays out obviously going the next fall.
Fitz.
Hey James, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm well. Your freshman class kind of set a high bar in terms of getting onto the field, making an impact. When you look at this class, do you see guys that can make a similar impact, or how do you view a class that's trying to get on the field, especially in this portal era, and how do you handle those guys?
Yeah, so I think you guys heard me say multiple times that, you know, obviously we felt like we had a good recruiting class, and we felt like there was more guys in that class that could contribute early, and it really played out that way. You know, it really played out that way with, you know, this freshman class. Obviously, you know, by the time we got to the midpoint of the season, some of them were playing at a really high level, and, you know, started to be a buzz not only in the conference but nationally about some of those guys. And obviously, we feel the same way about this class, and the fact that we have 11 guys coming in early. I think that helps. Last year, I think our number was similar in terms of early enrollees. I don't think that's the end-all, be-all, but it helps. But I can also make the argument, you know, that a number of these guys, I don't think Abdul came early, I don't think Nittany came early, and they were still able to impact our roster in a pretty immediate way. So, you know, we'll see how it plays out. You know, what I always say is I hope that these guys turn out to who we think they are, and then I hope we got lucky on 2 or 3. You know, I think a really good example of this, and I mean this with total respect to the individual and the organization, but, you know, Tom Brady, you know, you could make the argument that maybe the best draft pick in the history of the NFL. You could also make the argument maybe the luckiest draft pick in the history of the NFL. So I think we got a really good class here, and a couple of these guys that we're excited about that maybe aren't as ranked as high as some others may think. You know, be interested to see how their careers play out. As we know, whether it's the draft or whether it's rankings, once these guys step on campus, it doesn't really matter. Those things go out the window, and it's about what you do and how you produce and how you compete and how you earn the respect of your teammates and the staff. So hopefully, after winter workouts and spring ball, we're having a different discussion. You guys are asking me, and I'm saying, here's 3 or 4 guys that had great springs that are going to go into summer camp with a lot of confidence and a lot of momentum.
Brennan.
James, you did most of the heavy lifting for this class before the season even started. Coming off of a couple of tough years, what do you think it says about the program that you were still able to get that class last year and then follow it up with this class?
Yeah, again, I think when people look at Penn State and our history and traditions and the type of fan support that we get, that's a huge selling point for us. But I also would make the argument, you look at our staff and what we've been able to do over the last 12 years. We've been pretty consistent. Obviously, the last 2 years is not indicative of who we've been over the long term, and I think whether it's media nationally or whether it's high school coaches or college coaches that really understand the game, I think people felt like those were outliers, not really our trajectory, if that makes sense.
Bauer. Nate.
I think it's fair to say that this is the first full cycle of NIL implications for a recruiting class. What were the conversations like and the feedback? How big of an issue was it, I guess? And were you able to set up, did you feel the structure of NIL from Penn State side of things to be able to have those conversations with these players?
Yeah, good questions. I would say, for speaking for myself and my staff, but then also kind of a general consensus of coaches that I talk to. I don't want to necessarily say nationally, but a lot of the coaches that I talk to, I think there's major concerns with what's going on in college football right now. There's really no guardrails. There's not a whole lot of guidance. There's not a whole lot of governance, and it's concerning. It's concerning. And again, I think I've been very clear on my beliefs in NIL and my support of the student athletes, and us coming up with some way, whether it's NIL, how it's structured right now, or whether it's a collective bargaining agreement or wherever this goes to. I don't have an issue with that. I have an issue right now that there's no guardrails, there's no guidelines. I hate to use the expression the Wild Wild West, but it's a little bit of the Wild Wild West. And some of the conversations that are happening, they're crazy, to be honest with you. And it got down to the 11th hour of this, and it got as crazy as I've seen in my 26 years of doing it. So I think that's important. We're going to have to come up with a solution for college athletics as a whole. We're going to have to come up with a solution specifically for football. When it comes to Penn State, I think we were way behind. I've been very clear on that we were way behind. I think Pat and Dr. Ben DePuti, I guess I should say Dr. Kraft too, they're both doctors. I think have really come in here and hit the ground running, and I think we've made up a lot of ground, but we still have a lot of work to do if we say we want to approach NIL and everything else, when it comes to competing at the highest level, and that's not just in football, that's in all 31 sports. Whether it's facilities or whether it is retention of staff or whether that is NIL, whatever it may be, that each coach in each sport, feels that they need to be successful at the very, very highest level. We've made up tremendous ground in a short period of time, but we still got a lot of work to do. And the reality is we're gonna solve this problem like we've solved every other problem in our history, and that's together. And that's all of us. And obviously, you know, we have the power of the Penn State brand, but we also have the power of one of the largest living alumni networks, and it's going to take all of us to get where we want to go.
Audrey.
James, it came down to late in the stretch for you guys to get Kavion Keys, and he's somebody that you said on the broadcast, something along the lines if he could have a roller coaster named after him after that ride of recruitment. What was maybe the most surprising or most difficult part of trying to get him and then get him to the finish line?
I think the biggest thing, and this probably sounds a little confusing, but he was a really good kid, and he had given his word and made a commitment, and then came on a visit to us, and I think from that point on wanted to make a change, but didn't know how to make a change, and was really struggling, you know, with that whole process. And to be honest with you, we didn't think we were going to get him probably a month ago. You know, but you know, things worked out, and we were able to, you know, get him on board and join our class. But he was a guy that we really liked his tape. And then obviously, you know, with him going to the same high school as Michael Robinson, there was a connection there. And then when he came on his visit, we just kind of fell in love with him. He's got an infectious personality. He's got a great support system, you know, from his family. His mom has been awesome. And we kind of fell in love with him from that point on, and we're just trying to kind of make sense of it for both us and for him. And I just didn't know if it would play itself out the way it did. We had 2 really good linebackers committed. We would have liked to sign 3 in this class, and we were able to get it done. And then we went to go do a home visit, you know, last week with us, and then he was like, you know, literally as soon as we walked in the house and sat down on the couch, he said, "Well, I'm coming. I'm committed to Penn State." We wanted to get excited, and like as we were trying to get excited, he goes, "But I don't think I'm going to commit in the early signing period." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, here we go again." You know, that was part of the kind of the roller coaster, you know, and kind of just sat there and kind of went through our process and how we go about things, and you know how that we felt like it was in his and our best interest for him to sign in the early signing period. I said, if you think it's crazy now, you know, if you hold this thing on to the next signing period, it's going to get even crazier. And for most of these recruits and their parents, although the recruiting process is fun and exciting, by the end of it, they're as done with it as we are. And obviously that's probably why we went to an early signing period. They want it to be over. It's nice to have people at your house and have dinner once or twice, but when people are trying to come in every week and make a sale, and you know, it can be pressure. And I think that's one of the things I think we have to be careful of as coaches is for us, I've done this 26 times, and it makes sense to me, and I understand the process, but most of these kids that we recruit, maybe except for Joey Schlaffer, you look at our class, most of them and their families are going through it for the very first time, and it can be an overwhelming experience. You know, it's interesting though, I will also say this, it's like anything else in life, right? You can make the process as simple as you want it to make it, and you can make it as difficult as you want to make it. Alex Birchmeyer, who's one of the most highly recruited guys in our class, he was like total opposite. Like literally, I've never had a kid and the parents say, "Do not come and see us at the school. Do not come to games. We're good, we're solid, we're committed. You don't have to worry about us. Go recruit other players." Now we still did it because we thought it was the right thing to do. But like, so I tried to tell other recruits. They're like, "Well, we're stressed out." I'm like, "He's not." Like he made his decision, he stuck to his process, and he never wavered. And the reality is when you leave the door cracked open a little bit, it actually gets worse. But again, that's easy for me to say, and that's different when you're going through the process for the first time. You know, so that was kind of the roller coaster. But at the end of the day, you know, obviously we're very, very happy and very, very pleased that he's committed to Penn State.
Got 2 more, Ryan, and then Tyler.
Well, speaking of Birchmeyer, I'd love to know a little bit more about where he fits long-term think he could really, I mean, he could play all three really, but just kind of where do you see him fitting in? And then same with Jaden Williams. Is there a spot you see them starting out at?
Yeah, I think, to your point, I think all three of them we think can play all five. We probably are going to leave Donka at guard and let him kind of stay there. I think Birch could play center, guard, or tackle. Based on where our roster is right now, and I'm going to sit down and have conversations with them to make sure they're okay with this. But I'd love to be able to start Birchmeyer and Javen at tackle to see if they can do it. Tackles are the hardest guys to find. They both have the length and athleticism to do it. Birchmeyer's bigger than people realize. He's 6'5", is I think what our measurements at. So is bigger than I think people realize. So I'd love to start those two guys at tackle to see if they can do it, knowing that we know Javen can move inside, knowing that Birch can move inside to both guard and center. But the more position flexibility that we have, I think a perfect example is Landon Tangwell. As you guys know, we recruited him to be a guard, but he's also started a game for us at tackle and won a game at tackle. I think he played left tackle one game for us. J.B. Nelson's a guy right now that we think can play both guard and tackle. So the more guys like this that have position flexibility, it helps. So that's where I'd like to start them. But we'll see. I'm going to have a conversation with them first and make sure they're comfortable with it. Coach Troutwine. But to me, it's kind of like what we did a little bit, kind of like what we did with Zachy, where we started him at corner, thinking he probably was going to be a safety and move him back there. And I actually think the traits of playing corner and being out there on an island really helped his confidence moving into safety. And I actually feel the same way about being a tackle and kind of out there on the edge and a little bit more space and having to deal with those guys coming off the edge at you. That experience, whether they stay there or not, will be valuable. And I think the fact that both of those guys, if I'm correct, are coming in early at mid-semester, that gives you some time to work through that and figure that out. I think actually all three are coming in at this semester, which is great.
Last
James,
question, Tyler.
Yeah, across the trenches, you had a good week last week on the defensive line. Can you kind of talk about sealing the deal with both Joseph and Mason? And they come from such different backgrounds, and kind of curious how you were able to get to the finish line with them on board.
Yeah, so when you talk about those guys and what we were able to do, especially late, Jameel Lyons had been committed to us at defensive end for a while. You guys are going to love getting to know Joseph. Just so you guys know, he goes by Vicky. Joseph goes by Vicky. I guess part of the reason is one of his parents wanted the name of Vicky. The other parent wanted to call him Joseph. So even though they named him Joseph, the other parent just kept calling him Vicky. Is the story that I've gotten on it. But he's a really neat, unique kid. Came to this country to play basketball. Ended up changing to football and has kind of blown up. He really reminds me in some ways of Jason Owe, and I'm not saying that to put pressure on him. Obviously, Jason ended up being a first-round draft choice, but similar body type and athleticism and a basketball background. But he was a really good pickup. And one of the things I thought was important with him is one of my challenges that I see right now in college football is some of the guys you sign in a class, they're developmental guys, and there's nothing wrong with being a developmental guy. We got guys playing in the NFL. You look at Nick Scott. Nick, I don't think, started until his senior year at Penn State. After his great story of he had 26 reasons to move from running back to defensive back. And now, not only is he starting for the Rams at safety, but won a Super Bowl. And I worry a little bit in college football that you'll have less stories like that because guys won't wait to be developed. And so I had a very kind of transparent conversation with his lack of experience in football and make sure that his mom and dad understood that and the kid understood that made me feel good about it because a lot of times by the time it's going to take to develop some of these players, they're going to go into transfer portal. So I think having those conversations now more than ever are really important. Now, don't get me wrong. He may be ready in year one, and if he is, awesome, but again, making sure that if he's not, that they understand that there's still time to achieve your dreams. And then Mason, Mason we were heartbroken this summer. We were shocked out of nowhere he committed to another school. We got so much history, with his high school and so many different personalities and body types and athleticism from that high school that have come here and been really successful. I can't imagine in Penn State's history if there's been that many players from one high school on a roster in a similar amount of time that all are playing and playing well. So we just felt like we had a really good story to tell and just a track record of success. So we were shocked when he didn't commit to us the first time. And then literally, he called us, late in the year and was thinking about opening it back up and get started. And then we thought he was just going to kind of commit to us. And then he talked about like opening the whole recruiting process up again. We're like, you got to be kidding me. We're going to open this whole thing up. And although that may have been their thought, once he was able to visit and felt very comfortable here and at home here, and I think Nittany, had a big part in it as well as the other guys from McDonough. I think at the end it just made sense for the family. So that was big for us because I felt like we needed to sign some high school defensive ends in this class. So that was big for us. And then the guy that nobody's talking to and talking about, and I watch his tape, and I think he's really good, is Ty Blanding. You watch the guy play linebacker, he is twitchy and quick. You watch him play defensive end, and he's twitchy and quick, and you watch him play at defensive tackle. And he's making plays, and he's explosive. And I think sometimes New York is under-recruited. People view it as a basketball state. There's been a bunch of really good players come out of that state, and he's a guy I watch his tape, and I'm like, I don't understand why more people are not talking about this guy. I think his tape is really, really good. And he's an awesome kid. Love the family. Love everything about him. He's a skinny 260 pounds right now, so I think he's gonna end up being a big, powerful, athletic kid. And we're excited about him on our roster.
Thank you very much, Coach.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
We'll
Have a
have
good day.
Taylor and Terry up front, and then we'll have Kenny, AZ, and Andy and